History remembers many heroes, but few were as brave, fearless, and determined as Harriet Tubman. Born into slavery in the early 1800s in the United States, Harriet Tubman lived in a world where freedom for black people was nearly impossible to imagine. Families were separated, hope was fragile, and the chains of slavery seemed unbreakable. But Harriet Tubman refused to accept a life in chains. After escaping slavery herself, she made a decision that would change history. Instead of staying safe in freedom, she returned again and again to the dangerous slave states, risking her life to guide others to freedom through a secret network known as the Underground Railroad. Through courage, faith, and determination, Harriet Tubman became one of the most important figures in the fight against slavery. She led dozens of missions and helped free hundreds of enslaved men, women, and children, earning the nickname Moses because she guided her people to freedom. Her story is not just about escape. It is a story of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable human desire for freedom. This is the incredible story of Harriet Tubman, the woman who risked everything to lead others out of darkness and into freedom. Let's dive into her full story. Born Araminta Ross and affectionately called Minty in March of 1822 to parents Harriet Ritt, Green Ross and Benjamin Ross, Tubman was one of 9 children. The Ross family were enslaved in Dorchester County, Maryland. Chattel slavery determined that black people were property that were bought and sold. The children of enslaved women were also considered enslaved, regardless of whether their fathers were enslaved or not. Such was the case for Tubman and her siblings, as Benjamin was free, but Ritt was not. The Ross enslaver, Edward Broadus, did not allow the family to remain together and worked to split them up through the assignment of work. Separated from Benjamin Ross at a young age, Ritt, Araminta, and her siblings worked on a different farm owned by the Broaduses in Bucktown, Maryland. In 1828, at the age of 6, Broadus rented out Tubman at his whim to provide childcare for nearby overseers. Compensation for her work would go to Broadus, and time periods for how long she would be rented out would vary. This work separated her from her mother and siblings for extended periods of time. Tubman's life would change forever at the age of 13. In 1835, while she was running errands at a local store, she witnessed another enslaved person's attempted escape. She refused to assist the freedom seekers enslaver in capturing the fugitive. As the enslaver became desperate in their attempt to recapture the freedom seeker, he threw a 2-pound weight. Rather than hitting the intended target, he struck Tubman in the back of the head and fractured her skull. She teetered between life and death. Her mother, Ritt, nursed Tubman back to health as much as she could given their limited resources. After the incident, physical pain became a consistent part of Tubman's life. She experienced chronic pain from headaches and uncontrollable bouts of seizures, which Tubman herself referred to as sleeping spells. Historians now know that Tubman had narcolepsy, which is a chronic neurological disorder that affects the brain's ability to control sleep-wake cycles. Tubman's place in disability history is often overlooked. It is important to note that narcolepsy was a prominent part of both her identity and story. Vivid visions of freedom came to her while experiencing these seizures. As a result of her visions, her disability is often associated with her religiosity. However, Tubman's dedication to her faith and her experience with chronic pain hold equal weight. Both elements were key in her determination to seek liberation for the enslaved. Historian Deidre Cooper Owen spoke to the importance of Tubman's disability in her essay, Harriet Tubman's Disability and Why It Matters. Cooper Owens highlighted that she offered up a version of freedom where a disabled black woman sat at the center of it, where black women were liberators, and where liberation was communal and democratic. The pain of separation from her family and the cruelty of slavery never left Tubman. Forced back to the fields immediately after her injury, Tubman recounted, "There I worked with the blood and sweat rolling down my face till I couldn't see." She became determined to find some sense of autonomy wherever she could, despite the confines of enslavement. Negotiated with her enslaver to select her own work assignments. He agreed so long as she paid him a yearly fee. From then on, Tubman hired herself out on her own terms. With new tasks came the exploration of new geographic areas. Dorchester County's environment is marshland. As such, the duties given to the enslaved in this area were unique to the landscape of Maryland's eastern shore. Tubman, X became familiar with the intricacies of the environment through these tasks. Down the line, her familiarity with Dorchester County would be key in her journey to freedom. In an unexpected turn of events, one assignment required her to work alongside her father in the timber fields. Not only did this allow her to spend time with him despite years of separation, but also to work alongside black sailors. As regular travelers along the East Coast, these men were well connected. They shared their knowledge of the surrounding areas with Tubman and assisted her in tapping into a network of those also seeking liberation. It was around this time that she met her future husband, freedman John Tubman. The couple married in 1844 when Tubman was 22 years old. Upon their union, she changed her name from Araminta Minty Ross to Harriet, likely after her mother Tubman. Tubman cherished moments spent with her father and her time as a newlywed. However, her enslaver Brodus struggled financially and found himself in debt in 1849. He decided to sell more of his enslaved workers as a financial solution. Tubman discovered that Brodus's financial troubles were likely to lead to the sale of her and her brothers, Ben and Henry. Even Brodus's death in 1849 did not alleviate Tubman's fear of the sale, and Tubman sought to make her dreams of freedom a reality. She saw her future clearly, detailing to biographer Sarah Hopkins Bradford what she envisioned as she crossed the Mason-Dixon line that separates Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, and West Virginia. And on the other side of that line were green fields and lovely flowers and beautiful white ladies who stretched out their arms to me over the line. Making use of her wealth of knowledge gained over the years, Tubman set her sights on escaping to Philadelphia. The abolitionist movement, which was prominent in the city, meant she was sure to find allies and like-minded confidants. After developing a route, the journey with her brothers began. While on the journey, the trio caught word that Eliza Brodus, Brodus's widow, placed an ad in the paper calling for their return. Tubman's brothers decided to return to the plantation for fear of capture and subsequent punishment. Not the slightest bit discouraged, the visions that came to Tubman during narcoleptic bouts assured her she would be free. She pressed onward alone, guided to Pennsylvania by the stars. With the help of abolitionists along the way, Tubman journeyed from the Brodus farm in Maryland to Pennsylvania. In Philadelphia, she made connections with abolitionists, namely William Still, a conductor on the Underground Railroad. Tubman learned more about the Underground Railroad from Still. Often misunderstood as a railroad with tracks and trains, the Underground Railroad UGR actually refers to various safe houses in which abolitionists provided sanctuary for freedom seekers. Conductors led the journeys to freedom, while station masters hosted freedom seekers within their homes, churches, or other safe spaces. The more Tubman learned, the more her desire to see her family free grew. She decided to return for them in 1850. After a successful first trip in which she brought both family and friends to freedom, she became a conductor on the UGRR. She succeeded in her second journey as well, and on her third, in 1851. Tubman returned for her husband John. She quickly discovered that he thought she was dead and had remarried. John's new wife was pregnant. Though heartbroken, Tubman's commitment to freedom knew no bounds. She offered to take the couple to freedom, but John refused. In 1850, congressional passage of the Fugitive Slave Act changed the calculus for conductors like Tubman. The act stipulated that it was illegal for any citizen to assist an escaped slave and demanded that if an escaped slave was sighted, he or she should be apprehended and turned in to the authorities for deportation back to the rightful owner down south. Any United States Marshal who refused to return a runaway slave would pay a hefty penalty of $1,000. Many freedom seekers opted to flee to Canada instead of the northern U.S. as a result. Tubman conducted 11 trips from Maryland to St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada between 1850 and 1860. All of these journeys, 19 in total, over the years, made Tubman a hero, with many African Americans both free and enslaved dubbing her Moses after the biblical figure. While widely celebrated within her own community, Tubman was infamous among enslavers. Many called for her capture with bounties upwards of $40,000, which would be approximately $1,573,056.41 in today's dollars, between 1850 to 1860. Tubman brought approximately 70 individuals, including her parents, Rit and Ben, to freedom. Tubman spoke proudly of her accomplishments and famously stated, "I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." In 1857, After working to free her parents, Tubman initially brought them to Canada with her, but ultimately settled in Auburn, New York. Auburn was a hotbed of abolition and felt like an ideal place for Tubman and her family to settle. Frances Seward, abolitionist wife of Senator and later Secretary of State under President Abraham Lincoln William H. Seward, offered Tubman land in Auburn. This further encouraged the family to stay. Though Tubman had her freedom, the fight for the liberation of the enslaved still called to her. In 1857, she met abolitionist John Brown. Brown was outspoken in his support of anti-slavery, and though unpopular among white Southerners, his efforts were largely supported by those in the North. Tubman and Brown formed a close friendship, with Brown dubbing her General Tubman. She once claimed to have seen him in many of her narcoleptic dreams before meeting him. The pair worked together, including on Brown's plans for the raid on Harper's Ferry, now West Virginia. Tubman provided her geographical expertise and recruited formerly enslaved people to assist in the raid. While planned as a way to steal guns and start a revolt to free enslaved people across the South, the raid ultimately ended in failure. An army unit, led by future Confederate General Robert E. Lee, captured Brown and put him on trial for treason, murder, and inciting a slave rebellion. Brown was hung shortly thereafter. Tubman was not in attendance at his hanging due to illness. In April 1861, the American Civil War broke out over the issue of slavery. Tubman saw an opportunity to get involved, enlisting in the Union Northern Army as a nurse, where she cared for wounded soldiers with natural remedies. In 1863, Tubman took on the role of a scout and organized a group of spies. She recruited enslaved people interested in assisting the Union. Tubman helped Colonel James Montgomery coordinate the Combahee River Raid in South Carolina, aimed to harass whites and rescue freed slaves. The raid was wildly successful, with Montgomery's troops burning down many plantations and freeing approximately 750 enslaved people. With their newfound freedom, many of the formerly enslaved men opted to join the Union's fight against the Confederacy of the South. To date, Tubman is recognized as the first woman in U.S. history to both plan and lead a military raid. In June 2021, the Army inducted her into the Military Intelligence Corps. During her time with the Union Army, Tubman met her second husband, Nelson Davis. The couple married in 1869 in Auburn, where he, Tubman, and her freed family members, one of which was their adopted daughter, Gertie, would live out their days. Nelson built the family a home which still stands as of 2024. It is also in Auburn where Tubman founded the Home for the Aged, an institution that provided care for those with paralysis, epilepsy, and those with vision impairment and blindness. A staunch supporter of the suffrage movement, Tubman worked alongside various upstate NY-based suffragists, such as Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. The interests of abolitionists were aligned closely with those of suffragists, with both movements concerned with autonomy and freedom. Later in life, Tubman attended various women's rights conferences. She also collaborated with the AIM Zion Church, helping them raise money to build their church in Auburn. As collaborative partners, the church then supported Tubman's dream of making the Home for the Aged a reality. Nelson Davis passed away in 1888. In his absence, Tubman continued to dedicate her final 25 years to philanthropic efforts. In 1913, at the age of 91, Harriet Tubman died of pneumonia in the Home for the Aged and Indigent Negroes. In her final words, Tubman called upon her faith and made reference to John 14:3 in the Bible. She stated, "I go away to prepare a place for you, that where I am you also may be." She was laid to rest in the Fort Hill Cemetery in Auburn, service to her community until the very end. Harriet Tubman's legacy remains relevant. In 2024, the United States Mint launched the 2024 Harriet Tubman Commemorative Coin Program. On Veterans Day that same year, the governor of Maryland recognized Tubman as one of the greatest authors of the American story and posthumously named Tubman a one-star brigadier general. Continued discussions about and homages to Tubman stems from her powerful narrative of taking control of her own destiny and ultimately forging a path for others. She is celebrated not only for the hundreds of enslaved that she freed over the course of her lifetime, but for all of those who still look to her story for guidance. Just as she looked to the North Star to carry her to freedom, her work and values remain a guiding light to many to continue onward, no matter how harrowing the path ahead. If you want more deep, powerful documentaries like this one, please subscribe for more. See you in the next one.